Hello, we are from Estonia, the land of big, strong, and courageous men.
Bonjour, mesdames, messieurs.
We are proud to say hello to all you students of the European Union.
Hello, Europe! Fellow delegates, good morning. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Okay.
Kamila and Pavel present our regional students.
Bonjour tout le monde. Alors, elle est Theodora et elle porte un costume traditionnel de Roumanie. Je m'appelle Alexandra et je suis énormément contente d'être aujourd'hui devant vous.
Що си гуска звінила, життя на смерть заміла, життя на смерть ей зраніла, рука незнама.
Most people think the British are useless at foreign languages, and it's true. Most of us only speak English, but today we're going to try and dispel that rumour, so here goes.
Bonjour à tous et bienvenue à Strasbourg. Je suis Esme.
Et je suis Dan.
Et nous sommes la délégation de Shrewsbury School, du Royaume-Uni.
Ja, jag vill leva, jag vill dö i Norden. Ja, jag vill leva, jag vill dö i Norden.
Recently, we have seen the rise in popularity of separatist parties throughout Europe, such as UKIP in the UK or the National Front in France, etc. And I was just wondering if this may destabilise the unity we have experienced in the EU over the past years.
With the situation in Ukraine going on, how does the European Union plan to defend itself from outside threats?
Do you believe that the European Parliament is in touch with its population, bearing in mind most people do not know who the President of the European Parliament is, or even who their MEP is?
Ne pensez-vous pas que, à cause du terrorisme,
don't you think that because of terrorism, Europe is weaker, and this might lead to conflicts between the member states?
We were wondering that since the European Union is striving for unity, how it's possible that there is such a big difference in education between different members of the European Union, since education is a very important aspect.
We've been talking a lot about Greece in the media lately, and I was wondering what would be the consequences if Greece leaves the European Union as far as the euro value is concerned.
There are some disequalities between men and women in some countries, like salaries in the work market. Do you think this is an issue to be debated in our union, and it is possible to create a law, a common law, to solve this problem?
As we've seen from past history, what we now call the European Union started off as an economic union. My question is, what is the Union afraid of? I mean, isn't it a greater union that will lead us to a better future?
Once the European Union started as a community of very little countries, and it's grown bigger and bigger, and still every country has its own background, cultural differences, and also different things that they want to happen in the European Union. But now we see the movement of people going out and people wanting in, and doesn't that change aims of the European Union? And if it does, in what ways does it change the European Union?
I'd like to know what Europe is doing for violence against women.
I want to ask you, why did the European Union keep a different approach in the case of the Turkish invasion in Cyprus than in the situation in Ukraine? Thank you.
I want to know that during last 2 and 3 years in Italy there was an immigrants emergency, and in my own opinion, and I would like to underline that it's only mine, Europe have closed the door of countries that have rejected the immigrants. So, thinking about the actual situation of Africa and Asia, which will be the European behavior, the last one or not?
I have a question regarding the terrorist attacks. I mean, don't you think Europe is way too passive in its actions? In the context of racial acceptance and social acceptance, especially in the northern countries, where do you think we could draw the line between religion and pure violence and aggression?
In today's European reality, the principle of state continuity is in effect. According to this principle, political decisions and treaties between states aren't revoked in the case of even a violent change in government, but remain valid, a principle that the European Union calls upon, asking the newly elected Greek government to abide by the agreements of the former government. So, if all this holds true, then why financially robust Germany not continue to pay back the installments of the war loan that forced impoverished Greece to give in 1942?
I've heard that there's an ongoing discussion between USA and the EU and about a new trading agreement called the TTIP agreement. And I heard that this has a very big impact on the countries in the EU. I would just like to know what does it contain and how will it influence USA and EU. Thank you.
How we can bring about a change in people's behavior, we came up with the ideas of rewards for recycling. So say maybe if you recycle, you would be rewarded in the form of maybe tickets, so you could accumulate more tickets and then eventually prizes, and you would win something. So just to get that feeling of happiness with recycling, thus doing something for the environment. Also using websites, campaigns, and lessons so that we can teach people and expand their knowledge on the environment, but not only, say, children, as this may also be the audience of the education, but also that we can direct this at also parents, so we get a wider range and thus a wider audience, thus teaching everybody. We could also back this up with TV adverts, as usually when you see a TV advert, you usually tune out, but to fix that problem, we have decided to make it shocking so that it grabs your attention, but simple so that you can remember it. So we still have ideas in people's minds long after they have watched that certain TV advert. We will also have cinemas trailers, just so every time you watch a movie you may also get a little reminder. And also labels on every sustainable product as such. So just to promote sustainable development and technology and such. This can also be seen how effective it was in the form of fair trade. How every item that was labeled as fair trade was like, people, yeah, this is a good cause, we can back this up. So we thought, why don't we do the same exact thing for environment?
If you want to reward people for recycling, how will you check if they are recycling?
I would like to point out a scheme, you could say, that I have seen before in the past in Dubai. It was basically a vendor where you placed in recycling and it recycled it, and then the garbage man took it away and recycled it later. But for every piece of item that you recycled, you got points, and then later you could redeem those points for, as I said, prizes. So to actually gain the points out of the machine, you would have to recycle into the machine to get back what you wanted.
Some
representatives thought that the investment in the EU should always take priority before other countries, and examples were taken of the crisis in Greece as an example of how we should focus on internal EU issues before developing other countries. Also, there were suggestions that a dependency on aid could occur if too much development is given on a one-way basis from the EU to less economically developed countries. Also, very importantly, the difference between humanitarian aid and long-term investment was indeed highlighted, and many people gave many convincing speeches on how humanitarian aid still remains very, very important, and a thing that the EU should commit itself to. However, in conclusion, the point was made that it is a part of human nature to accept the idea of solidarity for those others.
As it stands now, the EU itself, as a supranational being, as it were, does not have a particularly active role in the provision of aid overseas. At the moment, that job, that role, is fulfilled solely by the individual member states themselves. So I was just wondering why exactly you feel now that we should have this dramatic shift. So the onus is not placed on individual countries to encourage development and provide aid, but instead why you feel it should be the remit of the EU as a body to provide this aid.
If you have 28 individual nations following different policies, often the effect is a lot less. Often the effect is quite sporadic, and there isn't one set goal. As a European Union, as a united body with common interests and common values, we believe we can actually bring a bigger change, a greater at greater speed, certainly within a body like this, a united body that can use these directives effectively.
We also feel giving women more rights, such as enshrining maternity pay and stopping discrimination in law, is very important. Countries should also be allowed to set more current service-orientated curricula, as Europe is fast becoming a tertiary economy, and we feel that it's very important to allow countries to specialise in technology and education and such like. We must encourage education on the EU to encourage pupils to engage with it. Gay marriage should also be encouraged to be implemented across all nations. This was unanimously recommended by the committee. There is also to be further empowerment of women through education, as well as the legislative rules placed further earlier. We didn't touch much upon the future of an EU as a committee, but instead focused on looking after the young people of the world, because we feel that they shall build the Europe of the future. We were the Committee on the Future of Europe. And to do that, we must look after and encourage the people, the citizens of the future Europe, to build the best Europe they can, whether that be within the EU or whether they decide the EU has become a relic. That is not our decision to make. That is a decision for the future, and we must allow the future Europeans to decide what will happen in the future, because they are the future.
How do you want to pursue the legalization of gay marriage in countries who are based on a strong Christianity belief? Thank you.
We thank you for the point. We feel that the committee itself was surprised there was no opposition to this from the more Christian-founded members, and we feel that this was being the only unanimous decision made of the day, that it seems that these nations, governments at least, are willing to implement this. We would like to see a policy where obviously this is enshrined perhaps in directives and therefore in individual countries' law, but we would also agree that there must be a compromise with the Christian faith, and would like to kind of perhaps move towards a system where clergy are by no means forced to adopt gay marriage if they think to partake in gay marriages, but we feel that there should be an option of a church-led gay marriage, but on the individual level of clergy, perhaps there could be an opt-out there. But we feel the nations in our committee unanimously accepted that proposal, so that proposal will be easier to implement in Europe than was previously envisaged.
The committee bears in mind the fact that media has a great influence on forming the opinion and a high impact on people. It also is fully aware of the fact that social media grants freedom of information and freedom of expressions, which are closely connected, but it should draw the attention upon the fact that it can develop hate speech and other wrong actions too. The committee believes that there is never only one true opinion and acknowledges the fact that cultural background is very important and it should be respected regardless the information which is conveyed. The committee highlights the necessity of security and freedom of expression and considers that the EU cannot impose people sharing an opinion, and censorship is not a solution. The European Union can evolve, can develop, and can change the mentality, but never can impose one considered true opinion. Therefore, the committee proposes that the European Union should develop its position, and being a vector of development and of safety and trust, it should assure that their positions are public and everyone can access the way that the European Union feels about some actions, because media can change words and can interpret it. Furthermore, the Commission thinks that the European Union should fund local news houses, and that's how the information can get easier into the minds of the ordinary man, because freedom of information is not about receiving the information you want and the information in an objective way. It's about the fact that if you want to convey some pieces of information, then you have the right and you have the possibility to make people know what you think about. Furthermore, there should be a certain % of TV advertisements where European Union could present information about their programs, about its policy and members. For example, in many member states, there are parts of the national TVs, for example, which present some programs of the national government or about some NGOs. Is the same example which can go with the European Union.
Number one was that EU members should provide education towards their own citizens concerning the culture and views of the ethnic groups that are immigrating towards them, and as well as those ethnic groups should be educated about the culture and views of the countries that they've moved to. Now, this was important because so much of the social tension caused in the countries is due to the fact that there's no appreciation of the differing cultures, that because they don't understand what they do not know, there is sometimes fear and sometimes just anger at the fact that these people are there. And so we hope that through a greater understanding, there will be increased peace between the different ethnic groups in the various countries. Finally, countries should be able to set their own quotas for immigrants moving around countries in the EU. This was so that, with an understanding of how many immigrants that they could bear with their own social abilities, and due to the amount of jobs available so as not to increase unemployment, with that quota they would be able to limit immigrants to their own countries so that they would be able to go to other parts of the EU to provide a fairer spreading of the different immigrants so that it's not particularly difficult on any one country in looking after the different pressures of those immigrants.
What would you suggest would happen if, say, these quotas were filled and that countries were stating that they couldn't possibly take any more immigrants? Would you, for example, then decide to send them back to the countries they came from? What would be your policy on a scenario such as this?
Of course, the quota would work alongside the rest of the objectives put forward by this suggestion. Quotas currently would not fail to deal with the issue because the countries which are currently under so much pressure are mostly in the southern belt of the European Union members, and therefore, once they've been able to move and spread out across Europe, numbers would be decreased to a greater extent, because currently in some of the northern countries there is a much smaller problem with that, and then the immigrant numbers would increase at a slow enough rate in order that the funding to develop those countries where there is so much humanitarian problems, in order to bring about stability in those countries, we would be able to decrease the amount of immigration, which is slowly decreasing from time to time, and therefore the quotas are very unlikely to be breached, so to speak. We are thinking about creating a collective fund to support companies that offer internships to young, inexperienced graduates. And we decided to sustain them with a certain sum of money. Lastly, we realized that there are lots of domains which are less appealing than others, especially because certain domains impose a high grade of difficulty. For example, the science domain. So people will opt for easier domains, and we are faced with a really big gap between the rate of unemployment in some domains. So in order to reduce that gap, we decided to focus on making unpopular jobs more appealing through a more efficient marketing scheme involving certain bonuses and relatively better paid jobs.
So you're saying that we're going to pay companies to employ young, inexperienced people, inexperienced workers, but actually the companies need also the experience and the knowledge that people have after they have graduated. So how will these bonuses and extras be okay compared to the experience that these companies will miss?
Well, obviously, when you choose to hire a less experienced worker, you are in a deficit because you are going to hire an experienced person, and so the quality of the production may not be as good. So in order to help them and help them sustain those young workers for a period of time in which those persons can gain experience and help produce a better quality, then yeah, that's the balance, because it's basically a compromise they make.